last week, I had the opportunity to visit two island nations near our shores, Cuba and Haiti. Each is facing enormous problems. In Cuba, how to reform a communist dictatorship of over half a century into a modern democratic member of the community of nations. And in Haiti, how to rebuild from a devastating earthquake of 2 years ago in a nation already one of the poorest on earth. I concluded the trip more optimistic about Haiti, despite all its challenges, than Cuba, which quite simply appeared frozen in time in an ideology which should be cast aside for a more modern view of how to progress in the 21st century. Let me start with Cuba. I am no fan of the Castro regime, but I'm also no fan of the foreign policy of the United States. When I look back at what we tried to achieve for over 50 years in Cuba, any honest, objective analysis will have to tell you that we did not achieve our goal. Fidel Castro is not a casualty of our old foreign policy. He's a casualty of old age. He's still there, and his brother now reigns as his successor in Cuba. Despite some notable achievements in this nation of Cuba in areas like health and education, and I saw firsthand as I traveled around some of these achievements, the government has maintained a grip on this island which is unfair to many of the people who live there. Political opposition is swiftly and harshly repressed, often with severe prison sentences and deeply troubling harassment. Those pursuing greater political freedom of government accountability at times even find their young children threatened, as was sadly noted in the New York Times on Sunday. Under President Raul Castro, there has been some modest reform, the conditional release of some political prisoners, and some economic reform. There's also been some serious oil exploration underway off the coast of Cuba. I wanted to go to Cuba for the first time to visit that part of Cuba other than Guantanamo to see what changes had taken place, to see what preparations the Cuban government had made for offshore oil drilling within 50 miles of the coast of the state of Florida, to see if the United States and Cuba could work together on potential environmental concerns related to offshore drilling, and to see if the 50-plus years of U.S. isolation were having the intended effect of creating a climate of political and economic reform. Most importantly, I wanted to talk to the Cuban government about a 62-year-old American development worker, Alan Gross, of Maryland, who has been imprisoned by the Cuban regime for more than 2 years. Gross was sentenced to 15 years for bringing internet equipment to Cuba for the island's small Jewish community. 15 years for bringing equipment to Cuba which any American could purchase at Radio Shack. 15 years in prison. Can anyone imagine that in today's world? Well, that is a fact in Cuba. I sat for 2 hours with Mr. Gross. I'm grateful that the government let me do that. I didn't know him in advance. I'd heard a lot about him, but I took the measure of a man who was really living under the most trying circumstances during that 2-hour meeting. Alan Gross is no spy. He is no terrorist. He's no threat to Cuba or its future. He is a humble and kind man. He wasn't trying to overthrow their government. He was simply trying to expand communications and openness in Cuba. And now, while his family suffers in his absence back home, he languishes in a Cuban military hospital, prison-like atmosphere. He told me what happened when he came to Cuba. He said, understand, I used my American passport with my name and flew in on a Cuban-owned airline, landed in Havana and took every piece of equipment that I was bringing in through customs and stood there while they took each piece out of the box and inspected it. At one point, the customs official said to him, what is this? And he said, it's a router. He said, I'm not sure you can bring it in. At which point Gross said, then keep it. Just give me your name. I'll come back and claim it as I leave the country. Man said, no, wait a minute. Maybe if I charge you a duty, you can bring it in. Gross said, how much is the duty? The man said, how much did it cost? Because it's 100%. We're going to charge it. He said, it cost $100. The duty's $100 then. He paid the $100, and all the equipment passed through customs right on the table inspected piece by piece, and he brought it into the country. He stayed at a Cuban hotel. They knew where he was, and his travels were well known, as most travels are, to the Cuban government. Then they arrested him and said he was guilty of trying to overthrow the government. It is hard to say with a straight face that Alan Gross was some agent of a government trying to overthrow the Cuban government. He languishes now over 2 years because of these accusations. I appealed to the Cuban government when I was there twice, 3 times in fact, to consider a humanitarian release of Alan Gross, to show some compassion for this man, to show a gesture that could help improve relations between our two countries that have seen enough division and animosity. I know our interest section, American interest section, under the leadership of Chief of Mission John Caulfield, has worked tirelessly on this issue as well. Sadly, the Cuban government seems determined to keep Alan Gross as a pawn, an innocent hostage in the endless and dated standoff between our two nations. I hope I'm wrong in that conclusion, but I left Cuba feeling this poor man was a victim of international horse trading, which has been going on for 5 decades. I hope the government will show compassion and mercy to Mr. Gross and let him come home after 2 years of imprisonment. I continue to believe that we should look for new ways to establish a relationship with Cuba. I believe that dramatically opening Cuba to the world at large and America in particular, the ideas and the energy of the American people, is the best way to bring real and lasting change to that island. We have tried isolation for more than 50 years with, at best, mixed results. Mr. President, I then visited Haiti. It was my 3rd trip to that poor country. It is the poorest nation on our side of the globe. And of course, the poverty preceded an earthquake of a little over 2 years ago. It's a flight of about 90 minutes from Miami, but in many ways, it's a world apart. They're proud and kind people. They have suffered unimaginable misfortune, both at the hands of repressive dictators and from Mother Nature. The history of Haiti is fascinating. They overthrew slavery, took control of their nation, and for almost 50 years waited for the United States government to recognize them as a nation. Because we were divided in our country over the issue of slavery, it was too hot to handle. It was an issue we wouldn't touch. Until the Civil War began, Abraham Lincoln was president, and he recognized the Republic of Haiti for the first time as a sovereign nation. 2 years ago, the world showed an outpouring of generosity and humanity to help this country when it was devastated by an earthquake. As you travel around Port-au-Prince, as we did last week, you can still see the rubble. You can still see the pancake buildings where so many people died. Thousands responded, donating time and endless effort. They still do. The plane from Miami to Port-au-Prince was loaded with Americans, many of them wearing crosses around their neck, T-shirts advertising the charitable causes that they were supporting, heading to Haiti to help. That spirit of giving has sustained the Haitian people through a very difficult time. Former Presidents Clinton and George W. Bush helped raise money for those efforts and the rebuilding efforts that followed. Today, more than half of the 1 million displaced persons have left the camps in Port-au-Prince and around the island of Haiti and found homes. Believe me, their homes are modest by American standards. To walk into an 8-foot by 8-foot room and have the woman there tell me time and again that 4 or 5 people live in that room, it's hard for many Americans to imagine. But for these Haitians, it is an improvement over where they were before. Many of the changes in Haiti are fragile. There's a great deal of work still to be done, but improvements are real. At this Jesquio project, Dr. Deschamps, amazing woman, took me on a tour and pointed to the ground to a little piece of equipment and said, "There's our well, and you built it with the Paul Simon Water for the Poor Act." She said we had to drill down 600 feet and we found crystal pure water. We bring it up, put it in a holding tank, treat it with chlorine, and we provide water out of this camp for 120,000 people. I asked her, how much did it cost to build the project? She said, $25,000. $25,000. Think of the cost in human terms, not to mention economic terms, of a cholera epidemic and the suffering that would follow. It's a lesson for us to learn in America that small contributions in the right places can dramatically change lives in the poorest places on earth. Ambassador Ken Merton in Port-au-Prince, this is his third or fourth assignment in Haiti. He and his wife love Haiti. They speak Creole. He is a wonderful representative of the United States and works tirelessly to help these poor people. We had a meeting with the president, the new president of Haiti, President Martelly. I didn't know what to expect, Mr. President. Here's a man who made his name as a punk reggae rap star and got elected president. I didn't know what I was going to find when I walked in the room. What I found was a bundle of energy, leaping off the couch and saying, let's get these things done. Cut through the red tape. My people need it, and they need it now. What a dramatic, positive change over some of his predecessors. And I was really happy to meet with him. Their energy, determination, and thoughtfulness give me hope for Haiti and a nation that needs more. They recognize that Haiti will never be on the full path to recovery and long-term stability without educating its people and employing them and bringing the kind of leadership and foreign investment so that their nation can grow. We in the United States should support that effort. For those in the Senate and House of both political parties who are looking for an opportunity to see where a small amount of American taxpayers' dollars are making a huge difference in the lives of some of the poorest people in the Western Hemisphere, that hour-and-a-half trip from Miami to Haiti is worth your time.